What's going on, buddy? Sulu here, and today we are back with the Diablo 3 patch 2.6.8 PTR First Look. We're going to be looking at the strongest builds in this PTR. Now, bear in mind, the PTR has been out for less than 24 hours, so there's still a lot of bugs, there are things subject to change, but we're going to have a look at the strongest builds and how they work. We're of course going to be focusing mostly on the new build, so we can look at the Frenzy Barb, the Hydra Wizard, and the Spear Barrage Witch Doctor. So let's start with the Wizard. Now, the Wizard is the biggest outlier so far. It has done 150s and in under 8 minutes, and they can probably still push it even higher if they want to. Now, the reason for these high pushes are because there's currently a bug so far. You actually get double proc of Death Wish, its Sigil, and Metal of Channeling if you are using Arcane Turret, so you're getting a lot more multipliers than you're supposed to. Now, if we look past that bug, it's still gonna be a very strong build, and let's have a look at how it works. So basically, it's an LOD build. You have the Legacy of Dreams build, and then you just have lots and lots of primals or ancients. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about each build so far because it's going to be an hour-long video. We're going to just have a short overview on how these builds work. So basically, on this build, you have lots and lots of multipliers for Hydras and for channeling spells. So for instance, you have its Sigil, basically a channeling, a multiplier of 150. You have Death Wish, which also is a 325% multiplier. Then you also add in Mental Channeling, that's another 25. Now, those three are currently bugged out and they are giving double as much as they're supposed to. So these 150s are a lot quicker than they are normally going to be. But the way the build works, you have the Serpent Sparker, you can extra Hydras. You have the Magister Helm, which also gives a lot of Hydra multiplier. Then you of course have a Scourge here. You have Enforcer Gem to give you lots and lots of pet damage. You have of course the LOD, and you have a Bane of the Trapped. And besides that, you do everything to get toughness, to get attack speed, to get damage for Hydra. So you have stuff like Task and Theo. For damage, you have Aquilus Caress for lots of toughness. Now, in terms of the Witch Doctor, I'm very happy to see that there are multiple builds actually working for this. So the first build here is an old build, don't worry about that one. The second one here is a 130 done in 9 minutes, and it is using the new set. So what this build relies on here is you have the 5-piece of the new Munduru's set, and you also have 2-piece Captain Crimson's, and you are of course using the new reworked items. You have the Barber, that is a big multiplier now. Also, the Gazing Demise was reworked to gain a lot more damage for builds like this. And we are of course very used to using Sacred Harvester for our weapon because you then get more Soul Harvest stack. This is almost always mandatory because you need the toughness, and Witch Doctor is pretty squishy without this. Now, this is a pretty interesting build. We are of course using the Combusors and Traveler's Pledge combination to gain lots of damage when you stand still. We are using Bane of the Trapped, Stricken, and also Enforcer. Now, the reason behind Enforcer is because your Spirit Barrage acts as a pet. So since Spirit Barrage actually acts as a pet, you can actually have Enforcer, which gives you a lot of more damage. And then you're also using Mask of Jiram, so your pets deal 200% increased damage. So lots of multipliers for pets here, and this is a pretty strong build so far. And in case you didn't know, the new 6-piece here, Big Bad Voodoo now follows you and lasts twice as long. So you have Big Bad Voodoo, and of course with Rain Dance you get a big multiplier. The 4-set is a very typical 50% damage reduction, and the 6-piece Spirit Rod deals increased damage equal to 50 times your mana regeneration per second. Now, this build is looking pretty good so far, and there's also another variant of it. So there's also another variant. It is done by a 126, and it is using the LOD setup instead. Now, the LOD setup is pretty similar. You have, of course, used a lot of Ancients instead of the 6-piece, but you are still using the same gems. You're still using the same weapons in terms of your cubes. So you still have Sacred Harvester, the Barber, and the Gazing Demise. Now, the Barber is pretty interesting. We of course have the new 6-piece. We have the Horde of 90 Savages. So basically you get the double effects of all your shouts. Each frenzy stack gives you reduced damage, so basically you have a 50% damage reduction buff, and of course also a big multiplier to frenzy. You deal 1000% increased damage per stack, so basically 10,000%. We did also see some rework to some of the other items in terms of multipliers. We have the Undisputed Champion, which is basically a 400% damage increase, and frenzy also gains the effect of every rune, so that's pretty good. And you also have the Bastion's rework change. It kept the thing that you can stack up to 10 times, but now it also gains more area damage. So basically you deal damage to things around you and they change, so that's really good for area damage, for nuking stuff around you. Now, this build here is probably one that is the most locked in terms of items and in terms of getting nerfed. I think it might get buffed a little bit, but it looks pretty good so far. Now, in terms of some extra items, you of course have the Depth Diggers in your cube to give much more damage multiplier to your primaries. You're using a combat rose with a stricken for killing bosses. You of course have the Traveler splits along with the combat rose, and then you have the simplicity strength in there to get more damage to your primary, which of course is frenzy. And then you also have the band of might for toughness, and in there you have the trap for a big multiplier. In terms of weapons, we have the Burning Axe of Sangres. It has the bonus that they always roll with fire skill, and you of course also have the secondary, which is a chance to fight through the pain when enemies hit you. It's a pretty good secondary, and you have the fire damage, so it's a very good weapon for this. And you of course also have the Oath Keeper, which makes it so your primary skills now attacks 50% faster, and you deal 200% more increased damage. Now this build looks pretty good, and I can't wait to start trying it myself as well. Now in terms of the group content so far, it is pretty screwed because of the wizard bug. So basically we see 4 players, they bring 2 wizards, and then you do a 150 in about 7 minutes. Now this is gonna get fixed because it is actually a bug and not because overtuning, so definitely expect some kind of rework here. Now another thing in terms of the wizard and actually the new 6 pieces got, I had to scroll down to a 135 that's been cleared in 8 minutes to find the first one. So far it looks like the LOD setup is better than the 6 piece for the wizard, but again that might change once they rework this. So in terms of the setup for the new Typhoon's Veil 6 piece that the wizard got, so the Typhoon set here, you gain the double duration of Hydras and increase the number of heads, and you then also give damage reduction per head, so you get about 50 to 60% damage reduction from this set. And then you of course also get 1000% increased damage for each Hydra head alive. And this build here is also using some of the bugged items, so you have the Arcane Torrent still, that is still double proccing on the Edge Sigil and the Death Wish, but basically this is how the build looks like. So in terms of looking at the wizard on leaderboard, don't really look at the clears as of yet because there's a lot of bugs in there, but we can of course look at it in terms of getting an understanding of how the builds work. So we again see some of the things go through as it was on the LD setup. You have the Death Wish, you have the Edge Sigil, you have the Serpent Sparker, and Tascan Theos, and of course also the Magister helmet that gives a lot of Hydra multiplier. Now this build is pretty interesting. It's supposed to play a lot with shields. You have your Ashen Guard Blood Racer that gives a lot of shield, and you're actually able to play with Squirt's Necklace, which basically means that you have a lot of shield and you don't really need a lot of HP. Now this is one of the builds I'm looking most forward to playing myself once I get my characters geared up. It definitely has a lot of potential to being a lot of fun. There's of course just a few things that gotta be ironed out first. There is also another issue in terms of the wizard informant. It looks like it might lag out the game quite a lot, but again this is PTR servers, and the PTR servers are not as stable as the live servers, so that might also factor into it. Now we do also see the Witch Starter being used as a trash killer for some of the higher clears. We see here that the 4-man group has done a 145 with the Witch Starter as the trash killer. Now this definitely also has potential to be a trash killer for sure, and it's looked pretty promising so far in terms of what they have cleared, and it's using the same setup as we have seen before. That is about it so far in terms of the first look of the PTR. Bear in mind the PTR has been out for less than 24 hours. There are still a lot of things that are buggy, the servers are laggy, the wizard builds are pretty bad, but we did get an understanding of how some of the things work. So first, we know how to build the Barbarian pretty well. It looks pretty tuned so far. It might need a slight bump in terms of damage. The Witch Starter also looks pretty good so far, although it might need a little raise in terms of toughness, because so far from what I've heard, it is a very squishy build. So far, we know how to build the Barbarian pretty well. We know how to build the 2 variations of the Witch Starter. There is of course using the new 6 piece, but also the LD setup, and they both look pretty strong in terms of damage. Now in terms of the wizard, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Of course they are going to fix the bug of Arcane Torrent double dipping on the channeling multipliers, but once that is ironed out, I'm looking forward to see if it's gonna be LOD or new 6 piece that's gonna get on top in terms of damage and toughness for the wizard. Now I will of course be updating this regularly. I'll be posting new content once we find stuff out. I'll be posting entire build guides in terms of how to play these builds. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It is a very brief look through in terms of what looks pretty strong so far and how we're gonna build them. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you did. But that's about it for me this time around. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out, folks.